What's up, Simonics? Welcome back to a new community selected tutorial. And this tutorial is basically a bit like the navigation template we had a few weeks ago because I thought you liked templates. So today we will create a Firebase Chat basic template. This is just going to be a basic version. If you're interested in more functionalities for chat, you can also check out the according course inside the Ionic Academy. If you're not yet a member, check it out, ionicacademy.com, which also covers group chats, more authentication, sending files, handling push authentication, push notifications. Anyway, today we will build a basic chat with Firebase connected to our Ionic app. Sign in, sign up, sign out, and then display data. So let's do it. I've already created the basic code for this. You just need a blank template and you can actually use the Angular Fire schematic. We're currently using Angular Fire version 6 for this. Maybe this is deprecated when the video comes out, but I hope we're fine with that version for a long time. Well, at least for a few weeks. To add the Angular Fire package, you also need to select your Firebase project. So go ahead, simply create a Firebase project for free, and then the ng-add command will ask for your project. So simply select it from the list, and there you go. Then we also need 2 more pages and a service that will hold all of our logic, and then we can dive directly into our app. First thing with Firebase is always to get your configuration. Simply go to project settings, and there's usually a button already in the overview if you're starting a new project, or you can find your project settings from here. So within our environment, let's call this Firebase config and paste in all the funny stuff. Now we can use this inside our app module to initialize all the packages from Angular Fire. And what we need in this tutorial is the main Angular Fire package, so the main module, then the package for authentication, for Firestore, the database, and of course the environment file that we just used with our data. So all of this goes into the array of providers. The main module is initialized with our Firebase configuration, and both other modules are just added so we can use them within our application. Good. A bit more on the setup because we added a few pages. Let's simply get rid of the home page and let's get rid of all this stuff. So I will make the login the first page within our routing, and since I think Angular Fire 6, there are actually cool things that you can do to protect your routes and actually even do more. And you can import them. Let me quickly bring in the import. You can use these redirect unauthorized to or redirect logged into to automatically add guards to your routes. So you don't need to come up with your own routing guards anymore. You can simply use them from Angular Fire. So I've created 2 of them. I called the first one redirect unauthorized to login, which basically means we can use this guard to protect all the pages that should be protected. And in case someone is not authorized, he or she will be redirected to a path that you define, and we will just use the / page. Otherwise, you can also do the same for redirecting logged in users. So what you previously might have done in your app component file by subscribing to an authentication state can now simply be done with something like this. And you can easily use it by applying it. Let's say for the login, we automatically want to log in users that come to that page to the chat page. So therefore we use this syntax, can activate, and put in our redirect logged in to chat. So whenever an authenticated user access the basic login page, the user will be brought directly to the chat. And now for the chat page, we can also use the same. So once again, can activate, and we will use the first const that we defined, redirect unauthorized to login. So now our pages are actually secure. Yes, I'm on a login, that's fine. Let's try to go to the chat, and that doesn't work because I'm not authenticated, so I'm brought back to login, and from login we will later see how we're automatically logged in. Now let's move into the service because we finished the routing so far. For our service we need a few things. First of all, I created 2 interfaces for this example because it gives you nice code completion, just feels good for a user and for a message. And we will use them within our code pretty soon. We will also keep track of the current user. Accessing the user changed a bit with Angular Fire 6, so we will see a slightly different implementation. And we also need our Angular Fire Authentication and the Angular Firestore. Both imports from the according packages that we already used in our app module. So with all of this in place, we can now begin and subscribe to the authentication state. Actually, we can simply use onAuth state changed. This will give us a user object. I'll also lock it out, changed, so we see what's going on. And then we set our current user to the user. Actually, this user object contains a lot more information than just the UID and email, but that's not really a huge problem. To begin with, let's create a few functions that we will anyway need. We will need a sign up. We need a sign in, and of course we need a sign out. So that's it. Sign out is actually pretty easy. You just use the AF-auth package and call sign out. Yeah, sign out, not log out. And this returns a promise. I had this before without returning it and then just doing the router direction immediately, but that was actually a problem. So you should really be careful. If something here returns a promise, you should wait until it is finished so you can then continue with the rest of your code. Now for the sign-in, it's also pretty easy. We will use a reactive form, or you might also use an ng model, no problem. But this helps to simply destructure an object into email and password. So if you pass in an object like email, whatever, password, whatever, and then a lot of other things in here, sign in, which simply access those 2 values and extract them into email and password, and that makes it life really easy at that point. And we will use the same for sign up because we already know we're going to use a reactive form, and then we can simply pass the whole form value to our sign up function and then get the value in here. So for the sign in, this is just one call, sign in with email and password. If you're also interested in like Google or Apple sign in, then I can recommend my book Practical Ionic. You can find it on my main blog devdactic.com/practicalionic. It also contains a lot more code about Firebase and social signup. But anyway, what we want to do on general signup is 2 things. First, we want to create a user with email and password within Firebase using email and password. And because this is a promise, we should await the result. And once we get the result, let's call result credential. We can grab the UID, which is the unique ID for a user or of a user that's created within Firebase. And to use the authentication, also make sure that you actually activate email password in here within your Firebase project. Otherwise, this is not going to work anyway. So with your UID in place, it's usually the case that you want to update a user node because sometimes you have additional information during the login, like a full name or nickname or anything like this. And the best place is either here or within a cloud function, but we're not going into cloud functions today. So we will just do it from here. And therefore we will write to the users collection using the unique ID of the user to set some information like the email, the UID. You could also add a account created date or anything like this. But this should be fine for our case so far. So let's hit save and let's continue with our login page. Within the login, we first of all need to inject the reactive forms module because we're going to build a reactive form. That just works better in general. We could also use just standard ng model two-way data binding, but I think in general, if we want to look at this as a little template, I think it's a good idea to use a reactive form and to also use a bunch of imports in our constructor. So we need the form builder to create our reactive form. We need the router for a bit of routing logic. Alert and loading controller, always a good idea if you have a login page. And the final one is just our chat service. Now, to create our credential form, which we will actually use for both login and sign up in this case to save at least a bit of code and not have too many files that we need to edit, we will just call it credential form, email, password, email required and type email, and password required and min length. You can vary this, you can actually create your own validators also if you want, but for now and for today I think that's just fine. Now when we call our sign up, there's actually not too much we need to do because the main logic is already in our service. Still, the problem is that we need to present the loading, hide the loading, route the user, so we got a bit of async code going on in here. And first of all, it's important to understand when you got a promise and when you got an observable. Actually, in this case, I think we don't even have an observable, so it's quite easy. We can use async await to create the loading and await the presentation. Both of these return a promise, and by calling or adding await before it, we actually wait until the promise is really finished and we're not stepping into the next line immediately. Then we can use our chat service and call, is this a sign up? Yeah, this is the sign up. And as I said before, the sign up function will automatically get the right values. So we can simply pass in our credential form dot value. Whatever. And we could actually even await that line as well. But in some cases, I don't know. I just in some cases like the then statement a bit more than using async await. For something like the loading here, I really like this syntax. It's short and I know what's going on. In this case, I really like to see that this is a promise and something happens within the promise block here. So we will call loading dismiss once we're done with the sign up. And interesting as well is after the sign up, we of course want to route the user forward. So we can call navigate by URL or navigate, doesn't really matter too much. So navigate by URL chat. And also if you want to make sure that the user can't easily go back, especially on Android, you can also pass in replace URL true. So that should make sure that the URL is completely replaced and basically the previous item isn't on the history backstack anymore. Now, in the error case, you should also handle this because we're writing a little template in here. We of course need to dismiss our loading as well and then maybe present an alert. And because we are using await in here, once again, you can simply or you need to mark the function as async as well. But that syntax works completely fine. For the sign in, it's actually, I think it's actually completely the same, just that we now call sign in instead of sign up. Maybe we could maybe do this in one function, but yeah, then we had a little if here for the error. Yeah, well, we could do, I will leave it like this for now. Also, something I used in, I think, a previous tutorial that I can't really remember is adding simple get access to the values of your form. If you create simple get functions for email and password like this, you can easily access the email and the password control in your template and then also access the errors. And you will see this now that we get to our login page HTML. Let me quickly bring in the header, nothing special. For the content, let's also add a bit of Ion padding to our form. And then we can get started with the form using our form group called credential form, I hope. And I will not use the ng submit in this case because we got two buttons on that page and I don't really want to trigger yeah, I don't really want to trigger an ng submit. I'll just use the buttons like they are to call the sign up or sign in below the form. That's totally fine as well. So let's get started with the first element, which is the email input. It's just whatever you want. I put an item into an input, no, the input into the item. Placeholder, not really mandatory, but that's the important part. The form control name connected within our form group. So this email is basically connected to this now. These are just optional things. You can give it a try with or without them. Doesn't really matter too much as well. The second item, also type password, important if you're using a password. Form control now connected to our other value, and that's it. And this will actually already give us a nice little login form. So finally we see something on the screen. 10 minutes into the video, great time. Now, what we also want to do is we want to handle errors in here. So right now this is not a valid email, this is not the length for the password, and we can do this now using the form controls because we can easily access them. Otherwise, this will actually be kind of complicated from the view. So for example, for our email control, we can check if email was touched or is dirty. Basically, this means a user entered something or clicked at least into the input and then moved away. And also, of course, the email needs to have some errors. Only in that case, it really makes sense to display this. Then you can easily check now emails. So in all the cases where you see email in here, it's because we have created the little getter in here. Otherwise, we would need something like this within the template, which would look really ugly. So then you can check the specific errors that are within that error object. And the same is now true for our password. We could in here also check password dirty and touched, and it contains errors, and then check for the required or min length error. And that really helps to give out some good information. So by now, nothing touched, no error. And once we start typing, we see email is invalid. Or if I remove it, email is required. Password needs to be 6 characters, or if I remove it, password is required. And of course, you can also style these. I gave both of those div elements the class errors, so I just came up with a little bit of CSS, a smaller font size, bit background color, padding, yeah, just some basic stuff. Do whatever you like and whatever fits your style. So with that in place, I can now finally sign up and let's use a short password, sign up. Yeah. Whenever I write something within my service, I have no idea why Ionic Serve isn't picking up the changes. I really don't know. The sign up is here, the sign in is here, and I'm using it. There's no error within Visual Studio Code. It just looks like it doesn't even exist in this case. So I really don't know why errors like these appear for me. But we see that, well, that the loading was displayed, but the rest should come up in a second once again. So there we go. Let's try and sign up with some trash. So email address is badly formatted, ADE, sign up, and password should be at like 6 characters. And then we do something right. And as a result, we are now within the chat page. We also see the on authentication state changed with a lot of information. Result, I'm actually not sure where we use this, but the important part is that somewhere in here we see the email, that's usually interesting, and the UID, which is the unique user ID. If you look into your Firebase project, you should also see a new user was added within Authentication, and within Cloud Firestore. Within the collection, you also see that the user with this UID, which should match exactly this, yeah, exactly, was added in here as well. So great, we're already connected to Firebase. We have the authentication in place, 20 minutes. Let's hurry a bit up with the chat, which actually isn't too hard. Where do we get started? Actually, we need to get into our chat service for some chat functionality that we haven't added in the first place. So I will bring in a few functions and then we will go through them one by one. First of all, of course, if the user types something and sends them, we need to add a chat message. We can add this simply to a collection. It will generate an ID. We will keep the content. Actually, we can make this like this. From will save the current user UID. Always makes sense, so you can identify later which user sent the ID. And created ad is interesting because getting a timestamp is a bit tricky. You should really import the Firebase SDK now at this point and use Firebase Firestore field value server timestamp. This is really the timestamp on the Firebase servers and not just some local timestamp. You don't really want this, you want to avoid stuff like that. And this is really something that works across all of your users, even if they're from different countries. Now, let's bring in two helper functions and then we will create one bigger function together. A function to get all users should be pretty clear. We can just grab our users collection and well, we don't really need this, but this part here is the Angular Fire, I think it's since version 6, way of attaching the UID of a document into the content. So usually when you grab this document, great example, we already got the UID. Normally there would be email, name, whatever in here, and you wouldn't have this ID. And by adding value changes and telling it to include the ID field as UID, you actually add this value into the document. That's just the whole idea. Previously this was a little map block with like 5 lines and that was, well, it always looked horrible to me, and now it's just like this. And because this sometimes breaks or makes the function signature look like this, so you get back an observable and UID string and you can't really use this in some places. It's better if you have a little type and can use it like this. Also, we want for each message that we grab from the collection to know which user sent the message. Of course, we only know the from ID, but by using the message from ID and iterating all users, we can simply return the user email or just return deleted if the user was deleted for whatever reason. And the interesting function now that puts everything together is get chat messages. This returns an observable as well, and we also need to get the users in here. So I will create an empty array in the beginning and then return this dot get users. It might look strange that I return this dot get users, but we will actually use a pipe blob and call switch map. And because we use switch map, we're basically switching to a completely different observable, which means we're not really returning this data. So in here, we can now set, let's use result here to make it more clear. We first of all get an array of users. Well, Simon, come on. So all users. And then we return something else where we want to switch to. Can't I automatically import this? Why can't I import the switch map from RxJS operators? Anyway, it's still marked as red because we're not yet returning an observable, but we will fix this now. We will simply return Angular Firestore collection messages. And we might also want to order the messages, so we can directly include reference order by. You can order by whatever you want, but we of course want to order by created add. And we also need to add value changes in here as well. This time I actually don't want to call this UID the field in the result. I want to call this ID. And to get some cool typings, we can use as observable message array. And there we go. Now switch map returns this new information, and if we now add another map block for all the messages, we can iterate them, and we see we get nice typings with the message interface that we defined before. So now we can go through all of the messages, for example, and add whatever information we want to, because it's really easy if you prepare everything like this upfront in the service. I want to set the from name now with our get user for message. And because I got all these typings, you see, it's like magic. It's flowing just in here. I can completely type this. I can define if this is my message by simply using the current user UID and comparing it to the from UID. And once you're done with this, you return messages and you will be happy. So let's log all messages, and then we're fine. Right now we don't have any messages, and we're not even calling the functionalities, so we should really quickly move into our chat service. And because I think we're 26 minutes into the video and you already got a busy day, let's go to our chat page. Not the spec file, that would blow up the video, but the real chat page TypeScript. So of course we need our chat service, and we need the router because I wanted to add the logout functionality and therefore do it in here. Now I will bring in a bit of functionality, or actually first of all the variables that we need. So we will access our Ion content as a view child, which allows us to scroll the content from code. If you write a chat, you usually want at some point to automatically move to the bottom or the top of a list. And by using Ion content view child, we can do this easily. Also, our messages will be observable whenever there's new data. Actually, we can use message in here. So our cool type looks great. And then we're not going to subscribe to the chat service from here. So we just call get chat messages. And then our view can handle this using the async pipe. And two more functionalities, of course. Only displaying messages is kind of boring, but sending messages is the real interesting thing. But we just need to call our chat service at this point with our message, and then afterwards set the message to empty string and call scroll to bottom, because we might be at a different place inside the view and the message is added at the bottom. So we definitely want to go to the bottom of our content. And finally, most important, our sign out. As I said in the beginning, make sure if you're calling the sign out from Angular Fire Authentication that this returns a promise, and you should really use the then block to use the navigation. If you just do this one line after the other, you sign out. In the background, it's not really signed out yet, and you're already navigating back to the login, which is in our case protected by the guard, which will then bring us back to the inside area. So you really got some race conditions going on in that case. Make sure you really wait until the sign out is finished and then do the next thing. All right. With all of that in place, we can go to the chat page. We don't have any messages yet, but we're already here in the chat. So I will bring in some code because the display is actually not too hard. We got our sign out button at the top. Yeah, that looks interesting. That's it. Let's do the footer area quite quickly. I decided to put the message input field into here. We can do this quite easily using two columns. First one with an Ion text area and the auto grow field. This didn't really work in the past, but is working quite nice today. So let's check it out. It now looks like this. We don't have any styling, but as you see, it actually grows pretty nice. You can also define the max length, the rows, of course, in our case, the ng model for the two-way data binding. but that's just our message input area. And then the button, which is disabled if we don't have a message, but otherwise nothing too special. For all of that, we will get some CSS in the end to make this look even better. But now let's quickly do a little example of using the Ion grid, Ion row, class, Ion line items center. Hopefully no typo today, and the Ion column, which was already wrong because I looked in the wrong place. Sweet Jesus, it's too late today. Let message of our messages using the async pipe, so the view subscribes to our messages observable, and then a new column for every message. And now this is interesting. In the past, I also had ngIf or ngIf else, but we can actually do this in one place. They will always have the size 9, but if the message was sent by someone else, it will be in the beginning. But if I send the message, I want to position it with a little bit of offset. And turns out you can just use offset with a condition. So if you're using brackets, it always means you're doing some kind of calculation, accessing a variable or anything like this. And because within our chat service, we added this Boolean my message, which checks if I have sent that message, we can now use this in a lot of places. So let message, if that's the case, if I have sent the message, I want an offset of 3 and otherwise 0 offset, and that works just great. Same now for ng class. It's really easy to see if we have sent the message or someone else. And therefore I will add classes like my message, and my message will be added if message.myMessage is true, so it means I have sent the message. And I can simply also use other message, which will only be added if I haven't sent the message, so not my message. Really, I sometimes really like Angular if it just everything falls together using stuff like this. And it just makes it really fun sometimes, if it works. So then let's quickly wrap it up using our from name, which our service is populating, so we don't need to take care of this from our chat page anymore. And finally, we can also use time, which is once again a bit tricky. We will take a look at the timestamp within the database in a second, but you need to call 2 milliseconds to actually use it with the Angular date pipe. And I don't know why I use the Elvis operator in here, just to make sure it works fine. Before we take a look at it, let's also add a bit of CSS so it really looks like a chat page. And once again, if all of this was a bit too fast for you, you can find the full code for that tutorial linked below the video on my blog. So don't worry, everything's there for copy and paste. Especially these CSS styling stuff, I don't really like to do it with you. This would take like another minute or 2 minutes. So really, it's just styling for the message input field to give it a little bit background like this. For the actual message to make it brown, and then for my message and other messages, different background colors, and the time to make it a bit smaller. So, hey, what's up, dude? And there we go. Actually, that doesn't look like my styling so far, so I'm pretty sure my message, other message, I'm pretty sure I have some kind of typo in here. I really... let's do a quick copy and paste. It still looks basically the same. Yeah, for the Ion column, actually I forgot that this should have the basic class message. So that gives the general styling, and then we got the different colors. Let's quickly open localhost as well in here. We see we're brought back to login. Let's do a different email in this case. Sign up. And we will see the messages from the other user now with a different color. So now I'm user 2. I can send it, it's immediately here, and boom, there you got your Firebase chat. To prove that we can also use multiple lines. I'll create this message, and this works because we have additional styling to use whitespace pre-wrap. If I remove this line, it actually looks completely condensed into one line. The information is in that document, so it's really important to use whitespace pre-wrap in there to wrap these things. And once again, if you want like file input or other elements, check out the course inside the Ionic Academy. And let's quickly wrap this up with a look at our database, which should now contain a few message elements. So if you want to get into groups, this would actually be inside a group. So you might have a groups collection and then the ID of the certain group. And then in there you would have this message collection. So you could then access for a certain group all the messages. But now you see we got the timestamp, we got the from, we got the message in here. And because of all of the information inside our users array, we're able to construct the right name and check out which user actually sent that message. So I hope you enjoyed this rather long video. I really tried to cover all the basics that you need to get started with Firebase, to build a sign up and login, and also to use the Firestore collections with like the real-time functionality inside a chat application, because I know this is a very common use case for a lot of people to get started with Firebase. On top of that, we got the new Angular Fire stuff with the guards that route us either into the chat or in this case, so if we access the login page as a logged in user immediately inside the chat, or if we're logged out and try to access the chat, it will bring us back to the login page. So we got everything in here. I hope you enjoyed this template. Make sure to give some thumbs up and check out the tutorial completely linked below the video. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the new tutorials, quick wins, and other app development and web development videos on this channel. If you want to learn more about Ionic with in-depth courses, a community of like-minded developers so you can learn and build your apps faster, you should definitely check out the Ionic Academy, which is my code school to help you with everything Ionic, with a huge library of courses, material, and a supportive Slack channel so we can get your app out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you inside the next video. Have a great day and happy coding. Simon.